For over 19 and almost a half years, I've been doing my best to be an empty channel, to let through what is undescribable and totally, absolutely unique for each and everyone who discovers the truth of who they are. And the joke is, of course, that everyone comes in from their own uniqueness, their own beautiful, creativity, and yet you always find the same thing. So when I saw who was showing up for this retreat, I was just thrilled, really. Old friends and people maybe that I haven't sit with before. But there was just something about the configuration that was coming together that felt just right. I know that most of you have been on the path for a very long time. For some of us, for me, it's been 50 years, and for others, they're just starting to open to what's been calling them since perhaps even as a child. But what I've noticed is now, in this time frame on the planet, there is a brilliance or a fierceness or it's just amplified. Not only the shadow, which our minds are tuned into checking out the shadow, right? It's like, oh my God, this isn't working and that's happening. And, this person is leaving the planet and, this teenager is really struggling and having a very difficult time. And, there's war and famine and, all over the world. So it's very challenging to also see what's bringing up the reaction to the uncertainty, to the fear, to the rage, to the division of people, families, because of personal belief systems, that what we're not actually so tuned into is what is bringing all this to the surface. What is actually illuminating and becoming bright enough. And then, of course, with technology, we're able to see it as it's happening. I don't know about you, but I watched for maybe 2 to 3 days, the unbelievable suffering and loss in Turkey and Syria. I mean, it was just, you couldn't conceive of the loss that was taking place. The families and their homes and the shock and the trauma and, all that was going on. So we were witnessing it, we were watching it. And in some way that brings forward a tremendous, just push it away. I don't want to see anything about it. I don't watch the news. I don't want to hear any of this. I'm on my own path and I don't want anything to do with it. And there's some truth in that, some wisdom in that. But at the same time, it also brings a certain kind of realization of the interconnectedness that we are, right? It's one of the Buddha's main teachings is the interconnectedness. And of course, his experience and the knowledge that comes from that experience is that we come from the same primordial ground. And you can call it the great womb. You can call it the ground of all potentiality. In the classic Buddhist teachings, it's the great emptiness, the void. But the actuality of it is that we all have the same mother, if you want to call it that. The great cosmic mother. We come from that potentiality, that vast womb. I love the Kogi's name. It's called Aloma. And they show it as this incredible, vast, swirling, infinite, silent, ground that we all arise from. Everything arises from this great ground. And then it just simply, without any kind of purpose or meaning, it just arises and wants to know itself in the myriad of forms, right? The great luminosity, the great being, everything that arises is, they call it the dynamic silence, the dynamic stillness. And it isn't to get something or know something, or it just simply arises to see itself and creates itself in the myriad of forms. It's really quite exquisite. And we are all from that. There's no exception. And that includes this river that is, I always think it's the soul of the place, right? This area of the mountain. I mean, to think that we're by a 13,000, foot mountain on an island, pretty astonishing, right? And, the flowers and the colors. And I mean, yesterday we spent, 2.5 hours watching the birds. No one moved. It was just watching the birds. So we are that. It's the same illumination. It's the same life force. It's the same intelligence and the brilliance that is, all of this is being created, and we are that. How can we be excluded from this? Are we alive? Do we breathe? Is there a wisdom that allows us to come in, to be birthed, to be a child, to be a toddler, a young child, a teenager, an adult, and then into old age, and then we die? What is that wisdom? It's like the seasons of the earth. There's the spring, and then there's the summer and the fruiting, and then there's the harvest, the middle age, the autumn, and then there's winter, and then there's rest. It lays down and dies, and then it becomes something else, right? So if you begin to see yourself as not a separate entity that lives in the thoughts in your head, which we all do, and it's quite innocent, because that's what we've been taught, and that's what is mirrored, especially, I think, within the culture of the US, the culture of Europe, not so much maybe Central or South America. Love the Latin heart, and that's why we like to come to places like this, because we can experience and feel this warmth and living from the heart rather than the mind. But still, if you think you're the contents of your mind, then you still live from your mind. You may have these great opinions and ideas, and you're altruistic, and you're wise in your life, and you're off the grid, and you take care of your trash correctly, but you still are living from the mind. You're still believing. And of course, as we all know, because we've all listened to our minds long enough, that is often our mother's mind, our father's mind, our cultural mind. It doesn't even belong to us. And yet we defend it, and we argue, and families have split up over our ideas and opinions of what's right and what's wrong, and we kill each other over it. We cause enormous pain because we believe and defend what's in the mind. But each and every one of you here would not be here if you weren't seeing through that. And you're seeing that there's something else, and that something else will not be stilled. It just won't be quiet. And it moves us forward. We end up trying to maybe read books that we would have never touched before, or, we find ourselves traveling in different parts of the world because it's supposedly drawing us there, right? We're drawn to Thailand or Tibet or Nepal or someplace like that. We're drawn to certain teachings and teachers. And it isn't because this personality somehow goes, I think I'm just going to, go to Tibet and I'm going to sit with some, man usually, but sometimes a woman that wears these orange and maroon robes. And I'm just going to go. And part of it is an innate sense of wanting to stop the suffering. We don't really get that, right? We think it's some highfalutin idea, that we're going to achieve. But for many of us, it was to still the suffering. Because I don't know about you, I had a lot of fun in my life and a lot of adventures, but I had a tremendously suffering mind. It just was never still. It never was enough. It was always trying to reach this, and then it would reach this, but not enough. Its movement is then it raises the bar even higher. Does anyone know about not enough? Yeah. It's a terrible tyrant, really. It's very aggressive. You start to see that, the contents of the mind and the inheritance of the mother and the father and, cultural and karma, all that mix, that it's really actually, in most cases, quite violent. And, you wouldn't talk to someone else like interiorly you talk to yourself. We're kinder than that. And then you start to realize that, why would I say that to myself? Why would I tear myself down and compare myself or puff myself up? That's another approach, as you make yourself bigger and more wonderful than, whatever it is. Partly the movement towards certain traditions and certain teachers, certain ways, is quite karmic. You come in with certain tendencies and certain kind of memories, and it draws you to certain traditions and teachers and locations. But again, what is it that's leading you? You can say it's your suffering mind, and you want that to shut up, to be relieved. You want to be free of the suffering. It's very innocent and actually quite loving. But what is it that's actually moving the life? And I think that's one of the most important questions you can ask yourself. You may have been meditating for 30, 40 years. You may hate meditation. You may do, 10,000 prostrations. You may do, whatever it is that you're doing. And it's very innocent. You very much want to respond to what's moving this life. What wakes up some morning and you're moved in a way that you've never been moved before? What is that? What is it that goes through these ungodly contortions, that many of us put ourselves through? And we give it everything that we have. I have a really wonderful sister friend, and I asked her what she did when she went back to see her family, and she said, well, we went to a retreat and we did prostrations all day long from 4:30 in the morning until, I don't know what time, at night. We didn't eat or drink water. I went, wow, wow. And it was brilliant for her. So what moved that? If you ask her, it was compassion. Because purifying her system in the way that she karmically was drawn to do did liberate and clear past obscurations. For her, that was absolutely right. For me, I couldn't think of a worse thing to do. You did what? But they had a wonderful time. It was very deep and very profound, So you find your own way. I did 2 vision quests, and I didn't drink or eat for 4 days. So there's a power to that. There's a power to that. But what I'm trying to say is, what is moving the life? What is curious? What does it go? Some of these practices work, and some they don't work. And so you find your way. We had this beautiful woman last year, and an incredible voice like an angel. I mean, she looked like an angel and sounded like an angel. And it stayed in my head, and it never left. And it is, the way knows the way. So just as Jennifer was talking about last night, you can be a rose, or you can be, a hydrangea, or but does the hydrangea compare yourself to the rose? Right? The paradox is, you all find the same thing. Male, female, historically, 1,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago, last week. When you come to your nature, the very same description is found. And it knows itself. You don't need a guide or a teacher or a Sangha sister or brother to tell you, yep, that's it. It knows itself. And so there's something that starts to take over, of the realization that it's not Sharon or Kathleen running the show. It's what Kathleen and Sharon thinks they're looking for. You hear what I'm saying? It's the essence, the source, the God, the brilliance, the being itself. It rises up out and becomes stronger than the mental thinking and identity. And it wants to know itself, and it will go, to the other side of the world, if that's what it's called to do. Or stay home and, never read a book and don't have a teacher, and all of a sudden you just blast open and there you are. It's totally unique, and yet at the same time, it's totally the same. There isn't anything new in this game. Source wakes up in the cells of the body of the individual, and it moves and draws you to the exact situation, the exact location, the exact, everything is precise and perfect for you, for this beautiful individuation. Source is so delighted with its creation called me. It's absolutely, totally, amazingly delighted. And yet, we're not enough. We try to achieve, we try to, grab, we try to, whatever it is that our tendencies are. There's also a very classic, and it happens to everyone that I've ever met, of course, myself included. It was the hell realm, really, of this path, was getting it and losing it. And the getting it is, the glimpse, whether that's through, earth medicine, whether that's through sitting with, some kind of a guru that hits you over the head and you see who you are, and, glimpses of deep meditation or whatever it is that you're doing, uniquely, for you. And it's like everything stops. The suffering stops, the search stops, the comparison stops, the thoughts stop, everything stops. And then, because it's your nature, it starts to arise and reveal itself. And so you are in your relationships, you can't stand your wife or your husband or your best friend or your kid or, whatever. And all of a sudden they're just like, oh, wow, aren't they amazing? Look at that. And you see, and you watch yourself, how the personality is like reacting and responding. You go, who's that? Who would ever do that? And then whether it's a week or a month or 6 months, once in a while you can push it to a year. Mine lasted a week or two. And all of a sudden, it all comes flooding in again, right? And you can't, in fact, you may even divorce your husband and your wife, or, kick your kid out, or, whatever. And you're deeply depressed because you've lost it. So you've seen the light, literally. And it knows itself. And there's nothing on the planet that can compare to it. Nothing. No love affair, no great sex experience, no great, anything ever can compare to it. So then, you sign up for the next retreat, or, you do whatever it is that you do to relieve and to grab it and to make it happen again. And of course, that will never, never, never work out. It's an experience. But we miss what actually will allow us to live in this experience because we're grasping on to the past experience. Anyone have any memories of that? Yeah. I mean, I've talked to people for 20 years and they still want that experience. They're grasping for that, to duplicate, that experience. And of course, then you've missed everything that source or God or wisdom is bringing forth to allow you to live as that, right? But it's innocent. We don't see it. You don't see it. What starts to dawn is it's love that is unconditional love, that's revealing itself in this place of hate, suffering, projection, trauma, abuse, violence. And because we've spent, I don't know how many lifetimes trying to push that away or compensate for it or make up for it or become better than, or whatever it is that we've taught ourselves to do. And actually, it's love that is unconditional, that's revealing itself and saying, sweetheart, this is what you've been compensating over. This is what you've been trying to achieve or push away or project. And just look. Just with all of your being, the brilliance of your heart, just invite it in. Just look. You don't have to do anything. You don't have to fix anything. You don't have to manipulate, manage. Just look. And then it unfolds and reveals itself. And this is what I don't see collectively as much as I'm surprised at it, actually. We're willing to see it. We've learned to be a good spiritual personality. You make those unconscious woundings and traumas, you make them conscious, visible. But then you identify with being a traumatic, wiped out, suffering, crazy person. Anyone remember seeing any of that? I certainly did. And then somewhere along the line, it starts to dawn that the gift of just letting you become aware of those neuroses. And they usually come in the form of control. And some people are like really, really, really good at controlling their environment, and they're very successful. And they're not about to give up that control. But the control is coming from, fear, extreme trauma of being invaded in some way, sexually, physically, mentally, not being able to, do anything about it because you were too young. And so to give up that control is to then dig up that trauma. And all the trauma knows is you're going to be annihilated in some form. There's no guarantee, right? If you give up that control, it's like, whoa, the worst thing the mind can imagine and has hidden will happen. And of course, the ultimate is I will die. I mean, that's what's moving this trauma and the compensation and the covering up of the trauma. The actuality is love, which is, if you want to, I know, boy, that's an insistent whatever that is, isn't it? What is it? Just some, that's what I thought it was kind of a bee or something. But the actuality is what's happening is when it starts to bring up the trauma, and often it will come in the form of rage, because anger is the best defense of trauma, right? If you're angry, everyone moves away from an angry person. It's just like, whoa, My teacher calls it, the temple dog. It stays right there at your most vulnerable, deepest wounded place. And, and if you remember how anger feels, it for a while it feels good, right? Ooh. I used to get angry and clean the house, because I had all this energy and I was righteous, and my head's like, well, that, I'm gonna leave him. I'm ready, man. I've had it. But it protects, right? It protects. So it does take a kind of courage. But again, is it coming from the person? I think the personality does have to collaborate. Eventually, it does get on board. For a while, it's just like, well, I don't know what's going on. I'm just in Tibet, and I'm sitting with these mamas, and I have no idea what's happening, But eventually, it starts to get on board. And it goes, okay, this is coming up. This has come up in my life ever since I can remember. This has been my response. We only have maybe one or two root patterns. That's it. They're complex and they, create all these little tendrils and side roads and whatever. But if you just bring it right down to the very root, it's only one or two. And you really can just look at those and start to apply them to absolutely every aspect of your life. And it'll all come back down to these one or two patterns of separation and pain. You can't negate the tremendous pain. It's a suffering. It's a really tremendous suffering. But when you get on it, then it's actually love. And there's this collaboration, and it's not only awareness that starts to see and look, but the personality kind of gets on and goes, well, why would I do that? No wonder my marriage or my relationship with my child or my work or whatever, no wonder it's not working. No wonder. I believe this, and I'm functioning from this belief. That's slack and fearful and controlling and angry and not being loved. I remember just recently, and of course it'd been layer after layer after layer after layer for many years, but it was like, why am I not loved? It was just this real small child's voice. Why doesn't anybody love me? Well, it wasn't true. Even if it wasn't, I was no longer that child. You hear what I'm saying? But it was very innocent, it was still speaking. It's, why doesn't anyone love me? So by letting it just, its voice reveal itself, just letting it speak, no one really ever listens to it, right? You're not going to listen to this little child. No one really ever has. But pure awareness, source, God, love, wants to. It's drawn to it. It's like a moth to the flame. And as a moth does come to the flame, eventually the moth is dissolved. It disappears. And so by bringing the attention to it, which is the loving attention, which is the conscious attention, then it disappears, it dissolves. And you are free. No longer needing to control or compensate or project or to be whatever it is that you think you should be to be safe. Really, it's very innocent. So then you start to not only look from love, which then permeates that density and that unconsciousness and that compensation, but you begin to see that this arises from love to be freed. To be freed. I was talking to, I think, Melissa the other night and last night, and how the tendency when you wake up out of the dream, and it's just like that. You hear that, you read that, you talk to people about that, but it's true. You wake up out of the dream of someone that is separate, someone that is needing something, someone that's in control, someone that is, fill in the blanks. It's just like you just lift up out of it. And then something called love draws you back in and saying, okay, sweetheart, let's touch each and every one that says otherwise. And then there's a moment, and it may take, I see it more and more accelerated right now. Everything is accelerated. Or maybe some of us, myself, it took many, many years of it just revealing itself, revealing itself, revealing itself, revealing itself. And the more it dissolves, the more there's freedom, the more there's authenticity, the more there's support, abundance, beauty, awe, whatever happens is seen from our true nature. And there's nothing better than that. Nothing. $1 zillion, a body that's gorgeous, that never ages, the perfect twin flame. Whatever. The child that, is beyond anyone's hopes, the new avatar. Because this is consistent, it's its nature. It's our shared nature. It's not something that someone has made up or only is achievable by, a rare number of humans. But it's our nature. It's the illuminating force that allows us to live. It shines through our eyes. It moves through our blood. It beats our heart. And it's the same life force of this unfathomable beauty that we're all totally entranced with. The same. And if it's a beggar on the street, or if it's someone who wears white and never gets fat and, perfectly speaks in these very low poems. It doesn't matter. It's the same. And then the life starts to function in this sameness, in this interconnectedness, in this shared love. And it's quirky and it has different opinions and it may try to defend those opinions, but it just rises and falls. It's part of the play. It's part of the beauty. It wears all these faces. It expresses through all these dances, these art. It's our art of how we express. So what I'm beginning to see after, most of my lifetime of trying, of working, of seeing what isn't still clear, of being human, falling, failing, screwing up, breaking my leg, whatever it is, right? There's just something that is beyond and greater and more prevailing and more constant than all of that. I don't know whether it's our Christian, what is it called? Christian Judaic? What are we here? Anyway, there's a lot of suffering in that tradition, right? A lot of rules and suffering and good and bad and hierarchy and right or wrong or sinning and I always thought, well, where does sinning and what does coming into the Christ or coming into your nature, what does that have to do with having a glass of beer or wine or when our little town we had these Baptist people and they couldn't dance. I just went, why can't you dance? They you know what I'm saying. So there was a lot of this how it should be and the rigidity. You don't have sex. You go, well, where are all these kids coming from? I was like, what do you mean you don't have sex? And you're not to enjoy it, or whatever it is. It's like, who thought up those rules? It has nothing to do with that, And maybe you are really a pure person. Personally, I'm not a pure person. I could never quite fit that, whatever that was. But what I'm trying to say is it dances in you, in your beauty, your uniqueness, your humanness. It isn't like being a human was an accident or a mistake. Now, I've told this story 1,000 times, but it was when I first moved to Crestone, and Crestone is a spiritual community. And then there's equally the anti-spiritual community, right? That's always true, right? You have the spiritual, and then you have the anti-spiritual, and then you have, whatever, the minors and, whatever. And so I was getting some kind of a treatment with this lady who'd lived in Crestone for years. And she was telling me about coming back from a retreat, in Albuquerque. And she said, he was very spiritual. He wore white, didn't have an ounce of fat on him, very quiet and calm, and only ate milk. Really, And she just went on and on, and I thought, well, it'll never work out for me, I will never be a spiritual person. I can't do it, I've tried. So, but we have these ideas, and what you find is, it comes in all different costumes and bodies and colors and experiences, but the commonality is you recognize your interconnectedness. That's the commonality. You may not, agree with, or you even take personal offense to how some people function in the world, but you'd never forget the commonality, the interconnectedness. You never forget that. And even when you're having an argument with someone, or it's kind of got heated up, and this is my practice, and frankly, sometimes I'm not very good at it. I just connect to that is true there as is true here. And that's where the focus is. And we can talk about fixing cars, we can talk about, whatever anyone wants to talk about, but it dances on top. And the connection is this. This is the reality. We do retreats at a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful Tibetan center in Crestone called Vajravidra. And there's these two Khenpos, and the Khenpos are Tibetan. I don't even know if they're monks, they're lamas. And they've been trained since they've been 8 years old. And they, in the Tibetan tradition, and they are so kind and open and loving and humble and innocent. They're really extraordinary beings. And my husband and I have been around a lot of Tibetan teachings and lamas, and I've never met anyone like them. They're just extraordinary. They just have welcomed us with open arms. I mean, they don't want us to become a Tibetan, and they accept us and love us and recognize us for what we are. So they have teachings in the morning, and they have questions at the end. And someone was talking about the intense times right now. And we were kind of kidding about it. It's weird, right? Life is weird right now. It's out of control, and it's always been strange and unconscious, but, now we can see it. And there's a lot more of it. So, it's weird. It's brilliant, it's this, it's that, but it's strange. It's very weird. And so someone said, well, how do you move through this? With clarity and a sense of sanity. And he gave this beautiful image. He said it's like holding this bowl, this clear bowl, and it's full of water. And you walk through hell, you walk through chaos, but you hold, first and foremost, this clear bowl of water, and don't spill it. And so that was his way of saying, is you find that has been leading your life forever, has been directing you God knows where, meeting God knows who, always perfectly working out. And this is the bowl of water. This is the vigilance. This is all is well here. It's not a Pollyannish lifting up out, ascending, bypassing, which has been going on for, thousands of years. This is it. This is the constancy. This is not changed. It doesn't become unclear, no matter what happens to it. It's the only constancy there is. And that's precious. And so the attention is, I call it bare attention. It's always here. And yet, you meet and move and, engage also with the insanity and the chaos. But this is the place of center, the place of sanity, the place of clarity. And it's the only constancy. Another one of the Buddhist teachings is anicca, is everything changes. There's nothing that doesn't change. This does not. You know, one of the great, I don't know if you've heard of him or read, but he's called Monkey, and he's a Japanese sage. And one of the things that really was very helpful here for many years is I am the unborn. And what he meant was, I am that that is before birth, that that has taken birth, that that has died, and that that still exists. That's where the fear of death falls away. It's not like, you know, I'm not afraid of death, you know. It's like, afraid of what? I am that that, you know, is before birth, life, death, and the continuum. It becomes another experience or another dimension or, you know, whatever. I don't know about you. I mean, I think because I'm getting older, but people are dying like flies every time you turn around, right? I mean, I don't mean to not be compassionate, but are you noticing that? Yeah, it's just people are really just, and yet it evokes compassion because you think, well, they needed to go, you know. So we better bring death out of the denial because it's right here. Always has been, but seems like it's increasing. But I think it's because I'm older, you know. All my friends are old, you know. I'm old, you know. So old people die. I don't know. I don't see myself as old at all. In fact, it just gets better and better and better and better. So don't let anyone fool you about this youth game. Though they're amazing. I don't know if you've tuned in. Many of you have children now. They're just like, oh my God, where did you come from? You know, they're awake and amazing and wise, and you know, and then also tremendously troubled. You know, again, it's both, right? It's extreme awakening. I can't tell you how many people in the last 5 years that have spontaneously just woke up. Just woke up. Never meditated or cracked a book. So, and then other people that have devoted their lives to it, all of a sudden they're no longer the devotee and the seeker. They're the abide. They are abiding. That's the shift I'm seeing. And if we can evoke anything in our time together now, is that. Can we come into what we are? Abide in what we are. Rest in what we are. See and hear and feel from what we are. The divine. We so often are chasing something rather than coming back into what we are, which is the divine. Pretty un-Buddhist, you know. I don't care. I just, in this last, I'd say 2 years, I have fallen in love with the radiance and the divine. For so many years, you know, I was trying to come back in my body and be present, you know, and be empty, and all that was beautiful training. But then one day I just went, wait a minute, I'm 75 years old. I'm practicing, even though that essential shift happened, you know, like 22 years ago. But I was still somewhat practicing. Did it fall?
No, it's not.
Just not sound?
I can't hear you all of a sudden.
Yeah. Have you ever seen that advertisement?
No.
This guy's sitting there and he's the one that all the people call, he's the tech guy. And he goes, did you turn it on? Did you turn it on? You know, you could say he said it like 1,000 times that day. You know, did you turn it off? Did you turn it on? Yeah.
Turn it off. Turn it off. But it didn't work that time. Oh, power's off.
Woo! All right, cool. So, you know, there's something called the divine, and that's what we are. And the divine is brilliant and interconnected and joyful and it creates a kind of a radiance. And the abiding is if there's just a giving up of achieving, of becoming better, of becoming less, of doing this, of doing that, whatever it is that you've been taught, or you are running still, of something that's not complete, stop. And just in this very limited time that we have together in this place that is paradise, I mean, give me a break. You know, this guy comes in, do you want empanadas with the perfect sauce? Or do you want, you know, I'm just going, where am I? Do you want beet juice? Yes. With lemon? Yes. You know, it's like to heck with too much food, you know? I'll do that later, you know? It's like, and they're gorgeous, you know, they're just like so kind. You know, so loving. You know, it's just amazing. You just go, oh my God, where did I end up? You know, it's stunning. So, you know, why not come into that? Have you ever asked yourself that question? Just rest, open, allow. Let go of the wheel. We've all heard that a million times. It's the truth. If there's a value in a guide, that's the value. If they've hit that same boulder 1,000 times, got up, tried to go around it, tried to climb on top of it, did everything they could, and all of a sudden they realize, oh, it's just a boulder. And then they come back and they say, you know, it's just a boulder, it isn't real. That's the value of a good guide. So from here, who has spent her entire life longing for God, opening to that, I've read 1,000 books, I've had marvelous teachers, wonderful, beautiful, amazing teachers, Sangha brothers, Sangha sisters, grace unimaginable. But it comes down to that. Come home. Relax. Come back. Open up. Let life reveal and inform itself in this moment and show up for that. That's pretty much it. That's pretty much it. And dance. Looking at my beautiful brother Alan, you know, dance. And enjoy the food that these gorgeous angels bring out and give. Would you like this or this? So the divine, you know, I've read, I don't know how many books, I'm not kidding, 1,000, maybe 2. And a lot of them, Buddhist influences, just, I don't know why, I don't see myself as a Buddhist, but I've had a lot of training in Buddhism and teachers that have that flavor. And there's this book out called Radiant Mind, and it's from a Buddhist. I went, wow, I've never heard of that. Radiant mind, radiant beingness, alive, bright, whole, content, home. And these crazy words that maybe if you had anything against, you know, born again Christians or whatever, and it's like, hallelujah, praise, praise, praise. It's true. It doesn't have laws or rules or how you should be or whether you should gamble or don't dance, or it has nothing to do with any of that. It's this, right? It's the great appreciation, it's the praising, it's the awe, it's the wonder, it's the radiance, it's the, you get it? And it's here. You know, if you would just live with two teachings, and one is there is always the constant silent I, period, end of story, no matter what. Nothing disturbs it, nothing increases it, decreases it, makes it more or makes it less. It is who you are, is the illuminating force that allows this life to be lived. Hallelujah. And then there's this spacious, open quality that includes this glory, whether you're in a desert or whether you're in something like this. It includes all of itself. And the two live together. And if you get too spacey and too out and out of that stillness, just come back in a little bit and rest. If you get too rigid, too still, too empty, too whatever, open up. And one of the great keys to the great openness is gratitude. It's not being a good person cultivating gratitude. It's the actuality of the human opening to its nature. That's gratitude. Do you get that? It's like the key. So you can have a gratitude journal and you can do this and do that, and that's fine. Or you can just this. So it's a shortcut, friends. It's direct. It's without the intellectual overlay, though the intellectual overlay can be very beneficial and helpful and interesting, right? Nothing wrong with that. There isn't a war. But what's most direct is the still, radiant inclusion. That's most direct. And we need it on the planet right now. We need each and every one of you that have dedicated your life. You're good people. You've given everything that you are and that you have. We need you to wake up and live it. Because then you're contributing to what's arising already on the planet, what's running the whole show. And it isn't to put pressure on, the ego structure. It's just, are you this? Or are you this? Fighting and fussing and trying and pushing and suffering tremendously. And it's moment by moment by moment by moment.